Singapore's festivals blend vibrant traditions and rich culture, from Pongal and the Chinese New Year to Deepavali and the Hungry Ghost Festival. Join Renjie and me as we explore how these celebrations light up the entire city.
So, RJ, the last time when we met, you were telling me about an Indian festival
Yes.
that's bigger in Singapore in its celebrations
Yes.
than it could be in India. What festival is this?
So it's the South Indian festival of Thaipusam.
Okay.
And I think specifically it's a Tamil festival. And the word Thaipusam itself kind of gives you a clue as to when in the year it is. Because it's the first full moon of the month of Thai, which is a Tamil month. And it happens every year, usually at the start of the year, right?
Okay.
But what's wonderful about Thaipusam is that it celebrates the triumph of Lord Murugan over a demon, in which he turns the demon into a peacock and then makes it his mount, right? So it's an important moment for Lord Murugan. And it's celebrated as by devotees in Singapore as well as in, wherever there's a Tamil diaspora, as well as obviously in Tamil Nadu. It's celebrated as a time of sort of penance and a time of triumph over, of good over evil, like many of the best holidays are. So in Singapore, what happens is that there is a very significant procession that happens. Right? And every single year it happens on the same path between two temples that are historically very important. So this path devotees have walked down for 100 years. And the procession specifically involves something called kavadis.
Okay.
And kavadis are, in Tamil, it means burden, right? So it's literally a steel structure.
Okay.
It's really heavy, and they are carried not by hand, but by hook.
Okay.
So these structures have hundreds of tiny little hooks that pierce the skin of the devotees. And so they're carrying these incredibly heavy burdens that are held up by the weight of the hooks in their skins, and they carry it down essentially a 4.5 kilometer stretch. So it's a long stretch of time that they are making a procession down on the streets of Singapore, and it's a visual spectacle. It's a spectacle that truly is one of those great, I think, mystic sights of human endurance. And the fact that it happens every year on the streets of Singapore, I think is just a wonderful, wonderful example of a festival that people don't really talk or think too much about elsewhere, but that apparently in Singapore it's much bigger than even in Tamil Nadu.
So as a child, would you go see this procession?
Yeah, so every year they would put it out in the news because they would close down streets. And so, I've definitely gone by with my family and kind of seen these processions. And it always is such a festive moment because, the sort of traditional Carnatic music is playing, there are religious songs and chants. And it really is just such a hypnotic experience because you see on the faces of these devotees, and they've been preparing for months at this point, right? For this physical feat of carrying, they are themselves almost in like a trance-like state. To be able to bear that kind of load with, the hooks in their skins is a transformative experience.
That's pretty cool. But speaking of festivals, what are some other lesser-known festivals that one can find in Singapore?
Yeah, well, so there, in Singapore, the big festivals are the ones that we're familiar with. So Diwali, Eid, for instance, is very big. And of course, the Chinese New Year. And so, for instance, during the Chinese New Year, which is also towards the start of the year, it feels like the entire island is taken over by the color red, which is a very auspicious color in the Chinese culture. And of course, of Chinese New Year music, right? So it's a very sort of distinctive and loud and unmistakable type of music that plays everywhere you go. You can't escape it. But there's actually another festival that I think is super fascinating that is not so visible again. It's not so well known, and it's called the Hungry Ghost Festival.
Oh, okay.
So this is a Taoist festival. Devotees of the Taoist, belief system, they to them during this period of time, in usually September, August kind of period, they believe that the doors to hell are open for a month, and out come the hungry ghosts who have been starving in hell, repaying for their sins, and then they roam the lands during this 1 month. It's their like free holiday. It's their all expense paid trip, right, to paradise, except it's to earth. And so what a lot of people do is they give offerings to the hungry ghosts. And this happens all across the island. Usually the offerings are in the form of incense. So they burn incense joss papers. But oftentimes it gets very visually eye-popping because there are, for instance, burnt offerings or offerings to be burnt that are made to look like a house of a mansion. So they're essentially burning it to offer their ancestors a mansion in the afterlife. Right? It could be a new Tesla. It could be like briefcases and briefcases of little cash, little banknotes. It could be anything. It could be feasts. It could be whatever, right? And so these are offerings that you see people burning in huge quantities during this time of the year, which I always think is fascinating.
Hold on, burning stashes of cash.
Yeah. Well, it's not real cash, right?
Oh, okay.
So it's it's cute because sometimes they'll make it look really realistic, like a banknote, but it'll say, the bank of hell, right? Because you're burning this for your ancestors in the afterlife, and so that they can be really wealthy and comfortable. And it's a huge part of sort of this filial piety kind of belief system, in Chinese culture. But it really is such a fascinating time, and it's also a superstitious time. So people don't generally travel because they believe that, things may not happen as they should, during this month. They don't go swimming, for instance. My parents never really allowed us to swim during this entire month that happens in the middle of the year. And it's really just one of those festivals that is such a big part of, the calendar, but nobody really talks about that much.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty cool, and that really threw some insight in the cultural aspect of Singapore. And all three festivals that you spoke of are of maybe different communities. Of course, Chinese New Year and this one would be the same community, more so, or overlapping communities. But that threw light on the cultural aspect of Singapore. And one of the coolest things is that these would happen at different times of the year. Now, over the last 28 episodes, we have gone north, south, east, west in Singapore.
All over.
And we have found out about the small nuances that make Singapore super special. We have 2 episodes left.
Yes.
So the next episode, I want to talk about something that everyone searches for on Google, the best times to visit Singapore.
So the calendar across the entire year. Yeah.
And the last one, we'll keep it for the next episode where we'll tell our listeners what the last one's going to be about. But these 2 are going to be a good recap of what you can really do in Singapore. So what would you say when I just ask you what are the best times to visit Singapore?
People always ask me this. You're right. So it's something that people will Google. It's something that people will ask. I genuinely don't have an answer to that because I think Singapore is wonderful to visit throughout the year for different reasons. And we can chat through what each of these reasons are. 12 reasons, let's say.
12 reasons? Okay, awesome. So on the next episode, 12 reasons of when you should visit Singapore or why Singapore is a year-round destination.
Yes.
Awesome.